So nice to begin this evening and week with another LCI webinar. So I want to welcome everyone to the July 9th, 2018 LCI webinar entitled How to Make Money with Your LCI Certification. I hope everyone is seeing the screen, the title slide for the webinar. I'm Allison Dewey, Director of Education at the League of American Bicyclists, and we have a great webinar lined up for you tonight. We have Kelley Westenhoff and John Ciccarelli here to talk about their experience as LCIs and running classes, occasionally or sometimes or always making money with those classes, and just hearing how they got started and how they keep things going. So they'll each be presenting for about 20 minutes each. And before I introduce them, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new Smart Cycling class marketing tools provided by the League. And then we'll have Kelley present for about 20 minutes and then John present his slides. And hopefully that will leave us with about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So let's see. The League has added some tools for LCIs to better market their classes. And how we're providing those and offering them to LCIs is through the LCI portal, which can be accessed through bikeleague.org. I hope everyone is familiar with that. Within the portal, there's a tab that says LCI Resources. And in the LCI Resources, you'll find another folder that's called Promotional Material. And within that folder, there are LCI business cards. There's a link to LCI instructor apparel through Land's End. There's this is fairly new. There's a class promotional poster and postcard which you can edit. It's in a PowerPoint slide format, so you can make edits directly to the document and then print that out. There's also a JPEG or a PNG file for an email signature that you can put so that your email reflects your status as a current LCI. That changes every year, so you'll see the 2018 signature there. We also have added a new Smart Cycling class registration system, which also is located in the portal. When you go in the portal to add a class to list it in the Bicycle Friendly America map, you'll find that it gives you additional options on collecting registration for that class, and creating a link. You can set your own cost. You can make it a free class so you don't have to collect money. You can collect money on site if you'd like that option. And you can put your description right in the form there. We collect a little bit of demographic information about who is taking your classes, and that's just for the growth of the Smart Cycling program. We want to start gauging those metrics. And an important thing is it helps you stay organized and it saves you time, because you can, if you are testing as part of your Smart Cycling class, you can input your test scores right into the system. No longer do you have to scan things in and send them or email them to me. You can just go in and enter that information into the online system. So there, we went over that in more detail in the February LCI webinar. So if you need information about that, you can go back and look at the February LCI webinar. Okay, so let's see. Now I am going to introduce our showcase speakers of the night. I think you've heard enough from me in previous webinars. So tonight we have two expert LCIs who are sharing their wealth of knowledge through classes and one-on-one sessions in their communities. So first off, we have Kelley Westenhoff, who is an LCI in Reston, Virginia, which is outside of Washington, D.C. It's in Reston and the greater DC area that Kelley coordinates a local middle school bike shop. She teaches one-on-one and group bike safety classes to students and people of all ages. Kelley is active in her local bike club and local advocacy organization and rides often her sweet, surly straggler. Kelley rode her bike from Seattle to Washington, D.C. in 2016 for the organization Fuller Center for Housing and has been coasting on the bike shop cred ever since. So we are so pleased to have Kelley here to share her experiences. John Ciccarelli is the owner of Bicycle Solutions. It's his San Francisco-based planning, design, infrastructure, and education consulting practice. John teaches bicycle driver education, learn to ride, and bicycle handling skills classes throughout the Bay Area, and also offers private lessons for all ages and abilities. John's other professional activities include development of bicycle, pedestrian, and active transportation plans, planning and design of bikeways, multimodal traffic safety evaluations, design, furnishing, and installation of bike storage rooms at workplaces and residential buildings, developing and presenting professional development workshops for agencies. In the mid-1990s, John served as Stanford University's first bicycle coordinator and was also involved in the startup of Caltrans Bikes on Board program. So, and you can read more about John and his work at bicyclesolutions.com. So I am going to hand it off to Kelley. And let's see, we have practiced this, so hopefully it goes without hitch.
I think I've got it now.
Okay.
And I'm going to present, give you a full screen. Okay, how's that?
Looks great.
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction, Allison. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with people what I've learned the hard way. I'm not nearly the fully rounded bike professional that John is, so mine is more of a homegrown kind of figure it out type of thing. So these are mostly ideas and suggestions, and I'm hoping that they will prompt you to look around your own community and figure out where you can plug in bike education and make some money from it. I think the first thing you need to do if you want to go and start doing this is to define what your goals are. Mine's a mixture of the three of additional income, getting to know more people in the bike world, and then this is bike advocacy at its most basic. Every time you teach learn to ride, every time you teach someone to be more confident, you're getting more bicyclists on the road. And so that creates more demand for infrastructure, that creates more people who are choosing better lifestyles and healthier lifestyles. So some combination of those three is okay, but it's okay if your primary mission is additional income as well. I'm hoping I can give you some ideas on that too. Why is this not moving? Oh, there we go. The easiest class to establish, I have found, I call it the gateway drug, is the learn to ride classes. In our community, we're teaching adults and we're teaching youth. I also do private one-on-one classes. I mean, just today I had 2 emails from different places within the Washington, D.C. area, people looking for one-on-one instructors. And then we do some public larger classes, and that's really great because then you get more people in, and there's some advantages to working with some of those organizations, which I'll tell you in a minute. The next thing you need to do is define your resources. I would sit down with a calendar, and I would go over it and block out time. You first need to figure out how much time you can actually teach a class. If it's a 1-hour class, a 2-hour class, look at your weekends or your evenings or when you have free time and say, okay, if I were going to block all that time out, can I afford to do that time-wise? But that's just the teaching part. So you also need to block time, at least probably an hour when you first start out, and then you'll get more efficient at it. But to prepare for the class, and that's the physical setup as well as getting the paperwork and things like that done. And then if you're trying to build this as a business or a side business, you need to plan time in your calendar, just like you would an exercise class or something else, that an hour a week or an hour a month, whatever it is your budget of time can stand, you need to plan for marketing. And that's making the phone calls, that's going to the bike shop, that's even riding your bike and talking to people about your bike classes. So that's the good part, is that you can do what you love to do and still make it part of building your business. If you're going to be teaching, you have to figure out access to equipment. You've got to have bikes. Some of us have garages full of bikes that we can reconfigure to fit whatever student comes along. Or if you have 9 or 10 students, you may have 9 or 10 bikes, and that might work as well. But you're going to have to figure out that part of it, and I've got some solutions I'll talk about in a minute. I find that for teaching, this is a folding bike, which is fully adjustable. I find this is one of the most basic and productive tools I can use for adults. And then, of course, because you're teaching for the league, you can't forget helmets. You've got to figure out where you're going to get helmets or how you're going to get helmets on those people. You need to figure out location, and you need to figure out publicity and communication. For your equipment, you have a couple of choices. Your students can provide bikes. You can provide them. Like I said, I kind of have way too many of them. But also because I work with the middle school bike shop, I have access to a lot of children's bikes, and I tend to pull out the best of them and use them for classes, and then we donate them to local kids. And then you can make an arrangement with your local shop and ask them to work out a deal with you that you're going to have the students rent a bike through them, and then they get the business, and they'll also be more inclined to promote your business. As for helmets, if you're providing them, there's something called helmet liners you can get. They're really great, and that way you don't have to do the old bowling shoes thing of spraying Lysol. You can tell the students they have to bring one and give them some, guidance. It's not something that's been hanging in the garage for 15 years. And if they're renting bikes, those are usually provided with rentals, so that's another option too. With our youth classes, we provide the helmets, and we let the children take them home. They're brand new helmets, and with the hope that at least the kids will be wearing helmets when they bike. And that's courtesy of my Rest and Bike Club. They have a program where they buy helmets, and they just turn them over to me whenever I need some. Location is hugely important. First, you can look at public parking lots that don't get a lot of travel. For instance, in the summer months, maybe your local schools. You can look at local park areas. I love teaching on basketball courts because they're nice and smooth. And if you get out there early in the morning, there's usually no one on them. The bike shop might have a big parking lot, and with permission, you might be able to use that. That's good for them, and it's good for you. You can be creative. My pastor at my church absolutely loves it when I use the parking lot for the community. And so that's where I teach sometimes if that turns out to be the best option. And then often your student's neighborhood might have a cul-de-sac or someplace where you can meet them, and then they can learn to bike in a very comfortable place for them. And I just wanted to put a plug in. Don't forget that if you have an organization or a building that's interested in letting you teach, but they're a little bit hesitant about the insurance, you can go into the Smart Cycling materials for LCIs, and there's a league certificate of insurance that you can request. And I know Allison can tell you way more about that than I can. There's a couple of things you can do. You can teach privately. You can teach through community centers or community organizations, or you can do some consulting. I do a combination of the three. I get a lot of one-on-one, and I wanted to give you a suggestion on this. Depending on where you are, we have a huge, pretty well-off immigrant community in the Washington, D.C. area. And these are people that they never got the opportunity to learn in their home countries, and they come here and now their children are biking and they want to bike with their children. I find this particularly true among women around the ages of 30 to 50. And they are very eager to learn. They have the resources to pay you privately, and they do want to do it one-on-one because they don't want anyone to see them. And so it turns out to be this really great opportunity to welcome people into the bike community that might otherwise have thought that they didn't belong. When we teach through the community center, we have a program that it took me about 2 years to wrestle it into existence, but it's doing really well now. The advantage of working with them is that they have, they're a nonprofit community center, and so they have programs where people can take this class at little or no cost. I think the cost right now is $5. And so it gives people access that might otherwise not have an opportunity to learn in a structured environment and really learn the safety skills. I find that a lot of immigrants who come from poorer countries have been taught to ride facing traffic. And if I can teach them anything, anything else would be gravy after that if I can correct that. And then sometimes consulting. We have transit areas here that transit organizations that are trying to increase multimodal transportation, including bicycling. And so when they're doing tabling events and things like that, especially if they have safety information they want to pass on, they'll have me come and table with them, and they pay me for my time as a consultant, and I help people figure out what their commute would be if they were going to ride their bike to wherever we are doing the tabling, usually at a metro station. So here's some concrete ideas of how to build your business. Align with your local bike club. Offer to create an on-ramp for safer riding. This is especially important in bike clubs because bike clubs ride in packs, and people in cars don't like bicyclists in packs. So you can be the person who can sort of help with that transition. And then, as I said, my local bike club, as part of the payback and part of their community investment, they provide helmets for the kids. Well, I make sure I make a big PR statement about that every time they do. Make friends with the people at your local bike shops. They'll give out your card, and they will actually direct people to you specifically instead of it just being a card up on their bulletin board. But that's more than just stopping by and handing out your card. Let's get to know them. I have 3 different bike shops within 5 miles of my house, and I give each one of them some of my bike business so that I'm a customer as well as a valued resource. Go to your local community recreation centers. Add to their programming. Be creative. Come up with a rodeo. Come up with small group classes. What is it that you do really well? Maybe you have a background in racing, so you're really good at doing group riding and leading group rides. That's a skill that not enough people know. So that's something you can set out and do. Approach senior centers. And I said senior centers, but actually what I'm talking here about is the residential communities for 55 plus. They pay event planners to plan things for them. And a lot of those people who are moving in are coming from biking backgrounds. And you can help them stay on their bikes and stay on there longer. And the executive or the event planner usually has a budget, and they can pay you something for that. But you got to get in there and convince them that spending the money on you is better than spending it on, I don't know, some other sport or some other activity. Pickleball is big around here. Go to your local bike advocacy group if you have one, and create a program for education for them if they don't have one. Our regional WABA, Washington Area Bicycle Association, has a very active education program, but our local county one does not. They're just trying to get it off the ground, and you can help them do that. In transit-oriented development areas, that's what they call them around here, around the metros. Every single one of the apartment complexes and condos have event managers, again, like the senior residences, where they're trying to provide fun things for their residents. They've also sold all those apartments and condos based on the idea that people don't need cars. And you can be the nexus between doing fun things and people getting back on bikes and realizing they can use them for utility transportation as well. So get in there and tell them that you're the person who has come to solve all of their problems in getting their residents active. Health fairs, hospital outreaches, I'll be honest, I have not had a whole lot of time to devote to this one. And I think having someone, knowing someone within the health community would be much more profitable for me to be able to do this successfully. But it was an idea I had that if they're having a health fair and it doesn't cost me anything to be there other than time, if I've got the time, that's a great option because it's not only for their employees, but it's for patients coming by. And, you know, what if you get to know a cardiologist and you can talk him into, you know, promoting e-bikes for his patients that are trying to get outside and do some exercise to recover. And then get to know your local DOT members, attend meetings, ask helpful questions, be that person who is a known bicycle safety advocate. I've been to several meetings on repaving, and I've had people come up to me afterwards and not only ask me questions about our bike club and about the repaving, but then asking for my business card because they say, oh, you teach as well? And so I always have my cards with me. Put up cards, stickers, everywhere you can get away with it. These are just two that I used. I ordered them through Vistaprint. I have not had a chance to look at the League's new materials. I might start transitioning to something like that. But in the meantime, these are taking care of what I need in terms of getting in touch with people. Now, here's the big no-no. Resist the urge to do all of this for free. What you're doing has a value. What you're asking is not unreasonable. People pay lots of money to have lessons for lots of things, and biking is a life skill that you are providing to them. So it's important to have a value placed on it. And if you agree to do something for free because you're a nice person or you like that group or you just want to do something, you should still prepare an invoice and then in your records write that you donated that time and that expertise. You worked hard to become an LCI. It has a value and you need to make sure that you keep that value steady. Don't give it away. So the bottom line is, what is it worth? Well, this really depends on your community and what the community market can bear. In the Washington, D.C. area, WABA is very good at hiring LCIs to teach their classes. They pay us $50 an hour. Each class for the confidence classes as well as the Learn to Ride are 3.5 hours. I love it when WABA's teaching and I teach with them because they're handling all the logistical details. When I teach for them, I actually make the $50 an hour. When I do my classes, because I have to put prep work in and I have to do the logistical details, I'm not sure I'm making $50 an hour. In fact, I'm confident that I'm not, but I'm still doing it on my own schedule and my own community, and I'm having fun. So you got to factor in the fun factor too. The community center teaching I'm doing, I told them that I thought the value was $50 an hour, and that's what they've programmed into the budget. And so far, they're going along with it. The confident cycling for 55 plus is something we're going to start in the spring. And it's because I've had so many older women come to me after the exercise class I do over there and say, oh, well, I would like to get back on my bike. So we know there's this nascent community out there of people who really want to just have that time to work with an instructor and remember how to do things as simple as starting and stopping safely. The community center has the fee scale so that it makes low-income classes available, and the local bike club provides helmets, and our classes are small. They're 5 to 10 students, and the instructor-to-student ratio is 1 to 5. It's important to look around your community and find out who else is teaching this and what are they charging, and that will help you. Look if you have an REI in your community and see what they're doing with their classes. This is what REI does in our community, where it's 6 youth in the class, $80 for members, $100 for non-members, and the students have to bring their own bike, and I'm guessing helmets as well. The adult classes are about competitive with ours. That's what we're charging for our classes, both WABA and for our community classes. And they provide the bikes and helmets. For our classes, we provide the bikes and helmets for Learn to Ride, but if it's a confident cycling class, the student has to bring their bike or rent one. And I think that's everything I have, but I do have some formats, and I have some lesson plans, and I have some curricula, that I'm happy to share. If you want to contact me afterwards, I'm sure Allison can make that information available to you, or you can take a screenshot of this. And I think with that, I can hand it back.
Great. Thanks, Kelley. That was really great information. You know, I've been an LCI for 15 years now. I was an LCI before coming to the league, and I've taught classes, and I've learned a lot from you.
Oh,
Um,
good.
it's yeah. I love what you had to say about giving bike education value and charging. And I'm sure a lot of you remember that you did pay to become an LCI. So you did make that investment. So it's good to recoup that investment and use that skill. So great. So I have a few questions, but I'm going to save them to the end. And now we have John Ciccarelli from San Francisco, and he is taking the helm next. Thanks, John.
Great. Kelley, I'm so glad you went first because you brought up some things that I should probably speak to as part of my program too. And there was a lot of commonality. I was amazed to find that our approach overlaps in a lot of ways. So let me talk about it from my perspective on the other coast, but with a lot of similarity. So put this window out of the way. So I'm a league cycling instructor based in San Francisco. I'm actually from not too far from Reston, Virginia. I grew up in Maryland, but have spent pretty much my entire adult life in the San Francisco Bay Area, first doing software and then into transportation, as I'll show. Certified back in 1997, so about 21 years as an LCI. And let's see if we can get this to advance. Good. So my education background is actually engineering, but I got that degree to get a software career going and did that for quite a while. During my software career, I got progressively more interested in bike commuting and then how roads got built, and it led me to a change in career. So my current career since 22 years ago has been in the transportation end of things, specializing in bicycling and walking. And what excites me about doing this little webinar is that it gave me a chance to reflect on where I'm going. I'm actually one of those 55 plus people that Kelley's talking about, and I can start to see on the horizon the ability to transition into non-full-time work. And what I think I want to keep is the education part of it and the things that are related to education. I actually went back just a few minutes ago and looked at my income and what has served as my income among those bullet points for the last 18 plus years. And the education part actually is about 21% of it. The bulk is still consulting, about 60 plus percent, with the balance being bike parking and storage. I do infrastructure, I build bike rooms. But it's a substantial chunk of change, and it's by far the most fun activity that I do for income. I like to gravitate towards things that are fun for me, that challenge me, and that are in flow. I don't feel like it's a struggle. It feels like it's a pleasure. Riding a bike, teaching and explaining and demonstrating, especially physical demonstrations, dancing, a lot like riding a bike, and then designing and tinkering, which is the engineering side. Those are the things that really I groove on. So how I use my education credentials. When I first got my LCI certification back in '97, it was because I wanted to teach the full what was called Road 1 class at that point. It's now called Smart Cycling 101. And I came at it from a personal perspective as how do people learn to feel as confident on the street as I felt commuting to work? And I have to tell you, I learned something in that first Road 1 class when I took it. I said, oh, that's why I'm getting cut off with a right hook all the time. Okay, and I was blaming the drivers, of course. So I was eager to share that knowledge with others. But as things went on, I found that it was logistically difficult to kind of solo a Road 1 class. So I did a lot more teaching of Road 1 classes through the bicycle coalitions in the Bay Area. And while I was teaching one of them, my client said there's these 2 students that are going to be in your day 2 class. We divided up into classroom day 1, on bike day 2. And these 2 don't know how to ride a bike yet. Well, what do you mean? They don't know how to balance and pedal. So can you teach them? And I networked a little bit with John Forrester and Preston Tyree and a couple other people, and I said, well, here's how we do it. So that was very interesting. That was sort of the start of my exposure to Learn to Ride. Before I leave this slide, the other things that I've been involved in, kind of growing out of the education of the engineering parts of things, have been to become more of a safety expert, crash analysis, that sort of thing, from the perspective of someone who understands how people make mistakes on a bicycle. And before segueing into an actual professional role in the engineering side, serving on several bicycle pedestrian advisory committees, really good training ground. My website shows my lines of business, the private lessons and workshops, that's one of the education realms. One example of straight-on bicycle driver education, the League's bread and butter, is a series of Smart Cycling 101s that I'm doing for Santa Clara County, co-sponsored by Santa Clara County Public Health and Valley Transportation Authority's wonderful bicycle and pedestrian program. And we've done these in part because the goals of those 2 agencies is to qualify a new cadre of instructors in the South Bay, Silicon Valley, to teach in schools. The focus in Silicon Valley has been mostly youth education. They don't have an up and running adult bicycle driver education or Learn to Ride program yet, but I'm trying to twist their arm. So we're about to wrap up our day 2 series, and there will be an LCI seminar to follow with, I think, Jim Ross teaching that. I'm not a coach, but he is. Learn to Ride, Kelley really nailed it. Learn to Ride is the gateway drug, and it's also a way for an LCI to make money in an unexpected way. Her comments about the international arrivals, it is so much like the San Francisco Bay Area. I can't tell you how many women in the age range that she mentioned, 30 to 50, 30 to 55, come to me and say, I got the airline ticket, I got the driver's license, I got the work permit, I took swim lessons, now it's time for bike lessons. It's just amazing. And they do have discretionary income. They are in high tech, their husband's in high tech, or one or the other or both, and so they are more than willing to get the education not only for themselves but for their kids. I have to credit our wonderful powerhouse bicycle coalitions, the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, which gets funded through SFMTA, and Bike East Bay, which gets funded through all the ballot measures and funding measures that they work with their county and regional agencies to get lined up. Also, as you know, with any great organization and coalition, there are some people that really make it work. And I have to credit Bert Hill in the middle right there in the green jacket. Bert Hill is, I'd call him the lead LCI for San Francisco. He just makes it happen. He's also the chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee for San Francisco, and just really a dynamo over the years in getting these programs established. In addition to plugging into SFBC's smart cycling programs and their Learn to Rides, I teach private lessons, and that's a substantial part of my income. So scenes from upper right, that's the SFBC Learn to Ride. That's me at the very beginning of it, starting it off before I divide it up amongst the 5 to 7 instructors we usually have on the day. What the students are doing right there is learning how to mount and dismount. I start the class with these words. Wouldn't it be nice to know how to get on and off a bike and look good doing it? And they laugh, and we're off to the races. The graduation ceremony is down below there. We raise the pedal wrenches like a bunch of swords, and people pass through and get their certificates. Happy rider in the middle. So Learn to Ride is something you can do individually as well. I happen to have a fleet of bikes in my garage. Sounds like what Kelley was describing, 3 adult sizes and 3 kid sizes. And I find that for the private lesson, they're not going to come, at least an adult, with their own bike. So over the time, I've grown the fleet. My fleet, like Kelley's, began with a folding bike. I used to teach on my Brompton, and that worked remarkably well and was very transportable to lessons. So this is my coaching flyer, And this has been a gangbusters business for me. I've taught almost 2,000 people since 2001. 3/4 women, many international, and an increasing number of parents bringing their kids. I would say Learn to Ride of my private coaching practice is almost 90%, with a small fraction of what I call bicycle handling skills. People come to me that have been off the bike for 15 to 20 years. Everything's rusty, so we start with mounting and dismounting, and then go rapidly through turns, coasting turns, and shifting. And then if they've got the interest, we go into what I call pre-driving skills, which is scanning, signaling, shifting your line, playing with how you operate between intersections and how you go through intersections. And then some smaller fraction, we do ride-alongs. So this is on street, either one-on-one or a small group. And that group may be adults, but most likely it's kids at the middle school transition or the high school transition. Palo Alto, which has always been a big bike town because Stanford University is there, believe it or not, they have a 50% bicycle commute rate to high schools. This is where other students at high school age are saying, you know, time to ditch the bike and get a car. Palo Alto's got it rocking. And so a lot of the students come to classes to learn how to be safe and confident on the street. This practice of mine, as I mentioned, my entry into LTR, Learn to Ride, was because 2 of my Road 1 students didn't know how to balance. For the handling skills thing, it was similar. I was teaching Road 1 and over teaching the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition Road 1 classes with Bert and his crew. People would show up to do like rock dodge and instant turn. There's no way they didn't have the handling skills for that. And not only does that mean we couldn't check them off on the road test score sheet, it meant that they were so shaky that they didn't feel comfortable being out on the street, because it was like driving down the street in a car and the doors are going to fall off. It wasn't a reliable vehicle. So I'm convinced that getting solid handling in place is a prerequisite for bicycle driving, and it's also something that an LCI can make money on individually, and that an organization like a bike coalition can integrate into an education program as sort of step 2 after Learn to Ride. My infrastructure, I'm a one-man band, and so I rely on a couple of software assistants. Yelp is a listing for businesses with a review capability, and I get a lot of my leads through Yelp, so I have a good, strong Yelp presence. Yelp keeps trying to sell me advertising, but I'm not sure that I can actually use the advertising because I've got as much business as I can handle as a sideline. I love Yelp's review capability, and I've got some strong reviews. My Yelp site's currently linked to my main website. There's this little snippet at the lower left there, and that's how they can click through and book a lesson. One thing I could purchase from Yelp is a call to action button, which would let them click on the main Yelp page and go right to booking a lesson. The way they book a lesson is with an appointment scheduler. There are many web-based appointment schedulers. I like Full Slate. Full Slate lets me paint my availability for all my locations, when I'm available, when I'm not available, and list the services that I provide, and the client can go in, log themselves in, and book a lesson directly. I get instantly notified, and if it is something that I need to feed back with them right away, say, oh, would you mind starting a little bit earlier, or provide more information so I can help you with the lesson, then I'm instantly in communication. What saves me is a whole lot of back and forth on the telephone and email. So it's like a lot of doctors, Pilates studios, massage practitioners, you name it, have this kind of a service, and it really amplifies your capabilities as an individual. Where I'm not really hitting on all cylinders right now, or all spokes, is Facebook or any of the other social media. And I've resolved in the next few months to do a better job on Facebook. I do have a web page for Bicycle Solutions separate from my individual Facebook page, but I think it's capable of doing a whole lot more than it is doing right now. So I'm actively seeking out some people that know more about that. For example, Facebook, unlike Yelp, would allow people to post their own pictures and their own videos of their experiences. And the parents especially are so enthusiastic their kids up and running. Some of them are very eager to share that experience, and that's got to build buzz. Referral business from parents in my coaching service is much more important than referrals from adults, because adults tend to learn and that's done. There's no repeat business for adult learn to ride, except for referrals. But parent referrals, that's pretty powerful. This is my non-education related business, but my LCI and experience as an educator and a way of looking at things from the viewpoint of a cyclist, whether it be an experienced cyclist or less experienced cyclist, informs my engineering and design work. This is a funny looking diagram here, but it's just basically a way of ensuring that all pedestrians and bicyclists of all ages and abilities can get through that part of that interchange. This was an outgrowth of my time at Stanford. Stanford hired me to run their program when they had not had a full-time coordinator. And I was so lucky to land there when they were transforming their campus from what I'd call suburban, with the buildings set back, way back from the travelways, no sidewalks. It was just a pool of asphalt paths. Intersections weren't defined. And they were consciously transforming it into an urban place. So I sort of rode the wave and learned so much about urban design. I had a great manager named Jeff Tumlin, who's now a principal with a consulting firm in San Francisco. And he was more than willing to send us all to workshops and training. The other thing I did to educate myself was to attend conferences. I went to Pro Rock and Pro Bike in 1994, 1996, and every 2 years for quite some time. If you're interested in coming up to speed as someone in engineering planning or less a technically informed advocate, consider attending the conference, which I think is now called Pro Place. It's happening in New Orleans in early September, and if you've never been to one of these, you'll just be immersed in amazing people doing things for biking and walking. I also do safety work. Again, coming out of engineering, I got the eye of someone who was in the UC Berkeley program that assists communities all over California with safety evaluations that are free to the local agencies. So along those safety lines, again, with my sort of LCI eyes in place, I'm doing a safety analysis for a company I will not name in Silicon Valley, and they had a bike problem. They've got tons and tons of their employees and their interns circulating on bikes, and for the large part doing a great job, but they're crashing a lot. And when I went to talk with them about this engagement, I'm thinking, oh my God, they're getting run over by their buses. But it turns out they're mostly falling all by themselves. So it's basic handling. So phase 2, which we're in right now, is going to be to craft an improved training program that teaches people the basics, hopefully keeps them from losing control of their cargo and starting improperly and falling over. It sounds basic, but when you've got 1,000 people circulating through 5 campuses in a large part of Silicon Valley, it adds up. Standards work, again, not education directly, but informed by my training as an educator. And how I got into this again was getting progressively more dissatisfied with the notion of coding, edit, compile, debug for the rest of my life, and deciding that I needed something different. And the bicycle pedestrian committees were coming up at the same time in the early 90s, and I just glommed onto that. Business setup. Allison asked us to comment a little bit on how our businesses are set up. In addition to the websites and such, my form of business, I'm a one-person shop. I'm a single-person company. So for these engineering projects, I typically team with larger firms. As far as the setup of the company itself, it's a one-person limited liability corporation. An LLC is kind of a lightweight corporation. It doesn't require that you have a big heavyweight board and pay corporate taxes. Basically, you're taxed as if it's ordinary income, and you're not allowed to carry profits year to year. I don't need to do that. I'm not Ford Motor Company. And the LLC provides a shield between lawsuits and your personal property. So especially if you are the owner of a house and something really bad were to happen and somebody sued you, and they could take everything your LLC was worth, but they couldn't reach through that shield and take everything that you're worth. So it's a useful thing. We mentioned the websites and Yelp and Full Slate. The other thing I haven't mentioned, it's really not education related at all, but it does provide about a fifth or sixth of my income over the years has been bike parking. Not really education related, but I can sort of speak with credibility from knowing what it's like to come to work on a bicycle and knowing what would be great for my clients to have in their buildings. Marketing, I could do better with this. I really stand on the shoulders of giants here in the Bay Area. We have a robust bike coalition in San Francisco and the East Bay, and the South Bay's bike Silicon Valley is a great organization too. Not as far along on adult bike ed, but we've got a great group of instructors. We have our own little email list that's very low traffic, but when we have opportunities, we share with each other across the list. This is a gathering I had in my backyard not too long ago when John Allen, LCI 70-something, was into town visiting Burt Hill. And John and I actually served on the National Technical Committee for a while, so he's an old friend. In the middle there is actually, in the white cap and the beard, is David Takamoto Wirtz, a UC Davis bike coordinator for about 30 years, retired. There's some businesses represented around that group there. Diane Serafini, upper right, teaches through Bonnie Wayman's, who's next to her, has a company called Easy Street Cycling in Alameda, California. And my timer's saying I've got to stop talking pretty soon. So networking between LCIs, networking in all the people that I visit as a consultant, I let them know that I also have an education business. FaceTime is really important. Kelley mentioned that. Get out there, whatever meetings you're comfortable going to. The more contacts you have, the more opportunities there are for people to know that there is this thing called education for cycling, and that you are a provider of it and you're well-spoken and they can rely on you. My only print publications are my business cards, and I really need to print a Learn to Ride card like Kelley has. I use my main business card, but I do need something to hand out that represents Learn to Ride, and then the bike shop flyer that I showed you. So to close, if I had to offer some advice based on my own quirky experience, I would say you're not your job title. So don't think of yourself as just an LCI. Think of yourself as a bag of tricks, a bag of skills. I am a communicator. I'm a demonstrator. I'm an organizer. I'm a leader. I'm a motivator. Lay those out and you'll be surprised what kind of tools you have in your toolbox. Learn with others. Maximize not only your formal ways of training, but your informal ways of training. Every personal interaction you have is an opportunity to learn something. Avail yourself, especially if you're coming up on the learning curve, that steep part of the early learning curve. Go to the conferences, spend the money, go to New Orleans and enjoy New Orleans, but immerse yourself in that group of people. Seek out online access, online resources that people are communicating in the business that you want to be in. Find your sweet spots. I was so impressed a while ago by reading a little book, and it turns out there's a lot of little books that are basically making the same point. There's 3 things to think about looking for work that you love. One is what are you good at? What are you either intellectually talented at or you're smart at? Top circle, what do you love? That's not necessarily the same as what you're good at. And finally, lower right circle, what pays you well? What's the market? So the overlaps of 2 of the 3 are frustrating. Like if you've got talent and passion, but there's no market, this diagram calls it not sustainable. I call it a hobby. Yeah, hobbies are fine, but maybe that's not quite the sweet spot. If you love something, doing something, and there's a market for it, but you don't know how to do it, then either find something else or find a partner that's talented at that stuff so that you together can address the sweet spot. So the sweet spot concept is a good thing to do a reality check on what it is you're pursuing. Finally, seek out what seems to be fun, follow your curiosity, nothing wrong with it, and it might lead you to some wonderful work that'll sustain you for the rest of your life. So I'm going to hand it back to Allison.
Okay.
As soon as
Thanks,
I can do that,
John.
there we go.
That
Go, Allison.
was also very interesting. I really enjoyed both presentations, and two very different kind of work. I mean, both very foundationally bike education, but different ways of going about it, and different avenues to explore there, and a lot of commonalities too with the Learn to Ride. We have, if you have a question, please type it in the box and I will ask the questions. We just have a few too many people to open the mics up. It just might be a little too distracting. But we did have a question, John, on the full slate schedule. Is that a fee? Is there a fee associated with that resource, or is that something like Yelp, which
Yes,
I think is
all of
easy?
these are, well, Yelp is kind of like a freemium service, so
Uh-huh.
it's free at the basic level, and they'll try and sell you add-on services. Full Slate is actually a monthly service based on the number of staff that you have. So I have several locations, but I'm still one staff, so I convinced them to treat me as a single staffer. I pay $34 a month for that.
Okay. And
And if I think about that in terms of what I charge for lessons, that's half an hour, so it's well worth it.
okay, so that was another question. How much for your bike education classes do you charge, or are you is your income for those?
The private lessons in the Bay Area market supports this are $75 an hour one-on-one, $60 an hour one-on-two. This is interesting. I realized that people wanted to, in their minds, save money by bringing two kids to a lesson. And I'll tell you, it's a hectic lesson. I got to really be active, but they're willing to pay $60 per hour per student for that, my market. And I even occasionally do a 3-student lesson at $50 per hour per student, so it adds up. Um, just like at WABA's rate for LCIs that plug into larger classes, the going rate here in San Francisco, Bay Area is also $50 an hour. So we have that kind of what we call the guild rate.
Mm-hmm. Good. Let's see. Let's see, Kelley. So how do you get community centers to buy into your programming if they've never heard of bike education before? And which the person asking the question is, they often defer to the local police departments instead, which is nice, but local police aren't certified bike instructors. They don't have as much knowledge probably as LCIs do. So Kelley, how do you deal with that?
Well, you show them that they can make money for the center by doing it. You show them this is something that the center gets credibility for. You show them the materials that you can get through the league about how bikes build community. You speak to their community side. When they're doing community events, so like a multicultural festival or that type of thing, ask to have a table, because what you're trying to show them is that the traffic and the market is there. Our police departments really don't do bike education, but I know a lot of them do. And a lot of them do bike rodeos. And bike rodeos are great, but they're not really bike education. And bike rodeos being taught by cops are not being taught by LCIs. So, I wouldn't disparage them, but I would try to convince the community center that they're missing a market, because every single one of them, even if they're nonprofits, they still have to make money. So you're going to show them how you can make them money doing this for the center.
Mm-hmm. Good, thanks. There's another question, comment. The league does not have a Learn to Ride curriculum. What method do you teach?
This
John.
is John speaking. I would be glad to share my one-page double-sided Learn to Ride how-to. It's got short cues that anyone who's done bike education should be able to interpret. And we've got a method that works 100% of the time. So I would be glad to work with the league. or share with individuals what works for me. I've taught many people, so has Kelley, so have the other couple handfuls of LCIs around the country that are focusing on Learn to Ride, and it's a proven method. I think that the league could well think of putting together a package about how to set up a Learn to Ride based on the people that are already doing it, in the same way that the league's group cycling skills curriculum was sort of productized a few years back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I would just add that because I work with so many children, when I teach those skills, I relate them to animal movement. And so I also have a sheet if people are interested and you think that your market is in working with children. And I use that both for the one-on-one kids as well as our group classes, because they can understand, they've at least seen a video of how the flamingo lifts his foot up, and that gets them ready for that pedal to come up and meet their foot, that type of thing. But I'm happy to share that.
Great, thanks.
I love that.
And
we got to talk offline, Kelley. I like the way you describe things.
And a great place to share these would be the hub. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the hub in the days following this webinar. There's another question for both of you. Kelley, why don't we hear from you first? Is how do you tap into the international community for those Learn to Ride classes?
Wow. Well, I'm part of a Women in Bicycles group that is online. It's a Facebook group, and there are a number of women in that group who, many of them are Indian descent. Mm-hmm. And I've ridden with them, and then once I've ridden with them and we talk about different things, then they give me access to their community. They start talking me up. I also think working through the schools, if you have access to like a Safe Routes to School person in your schools, talking with them and seeing how you can get involved with helping them, because then that makes you a familiar face. And particularly also in our community centers, that's where a lot of our international families are as well. So I think any one of those, but if you think about the different places where the international immigrants are hanging out, that's where you want to put up your business card. That's where you want to become a known customer. If you have a favorite Indian restaurant or a favorite Thai restaurant, go in there a lot and then say, by the way, here's my business card.
That's great. John, how about you?
They kind of find me. I think a lot of my business comes in off of web searches. I'm constantly curious about which web search, so I ask that. Full Slate allows you to put custom questions and checkboxes in the intake form. So sometimes they'll tell me that they came in through Yelp or Google or a bike shop flyer or whatever. I actually could do a lot more proactive inquiry and how to find people. I do know that certain parts of the Silicon Valley area and the Greater Bay Area are places where certain nationalities of origin tend to cluster, like Fremont, Newark, California, big Indian American, Pakistani community in high tech. So I could do outreach to centers there. But what tends to happen is one person finds me and then they tell all their friends. And it goes person to person to person.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we are about out of time and all questions have been answered. So I want to thank Kelley Westenhoff and John Ciccarelli for their time. It's wonderful to have you both sharing your experience with us and allowing us to learn from you. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up and call it a night. So we'll check out the hub for this recording if you want to pass it along and share it with people. I'll also be posting about the next LCI webinar, which will happen later in the summer in August. So have a great night and thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Allison.